Hi, this is Stephen Brower from Art Valley Community College. This is to supplement Chapter 7 from the Stallings book. I had to be careful to not use the slides that were provided from the publisher because I would violate copyright law if I were basically be plagiarizing if I use the slides. I'm only supposed to use the slides and put them in a controlled environment, so I'm not supposed to create a YouTube video out of it. What I will do, so from the Pearson website, this is for our book, the 10th edition. When it, here in the 10th edition, when it lists the table of contents, it doesn't go into the specifics for Chapter 7 for the input and output. The prior edition, however, I just want to scroll there for a second. When I go to the table of contents for that one, has a little more information in the table of contents than the one for our edition. But I do want to point out a couple of things. So regarding input-output, one of the things that the chapter does address are three types of input-output that take place. One's programmed input-output, the other one's interrupt-driven input-output, and then the direct memory access. With the programmed input-output, the processor is directly in control in sending commands to the device, and the processor is waiting for the device to provide the information that it needs. So with programmed I/O, the processor is directly controlling the input-output device. With interrupt-driven input-output, if the processor makes a request of a device, what it can do is it then can work on some other task, basically start executing other program, and when that information comes back from the device, where it's ready for the processor to work with it, it'll send an interrupt to the processor, and then the processor will process the information coming in or whatever the next step is it was dealing with output. One of the issues with the interrupt-driven input-output is how does the processor know which device interrupted it? And so there's some techniques that are shown through the chapter. One is a very expensive but very simple way, which is have multiple interrupt lines. And so this way it knows based on the interrupt line which is the one that interrupted it. The other one would be a software poll, where the processor would then interrogate each device and say, did you interrupt me? Did you interrupt me? Did you interrupt me? Did you interrupt me? Another approach is where it's sort of this vector that is daisy-chained through the devices. And with that vector that's daisy-chained through the devices, is that when the processor is then communicating, it's all the other devices are seeing it but ignoring it because it's not their communication that's being done. It's being based on that address is going to the appropriate input-output device. And so those are just three of the techniques that the chapter goes through. The last one is the direct memory access. Now, the direct memory access, the processor kind of steps out of the process. So if something needs to be read from disk into memory, the processor sets up the memory and the drive to basically kind of work together, basically telling the memory you're going to get some data from the drive, telling the drive you're going to send the data to the memory, and then the processor steps back. Under two different ways the DMA, direct memory access, is done. One, the processor works on something else. The other one, the processor sleeps and waits for that memory to transfer. So again, just three of the techniques for input-output that the chapter covers is the programmed input-output, where the CPU is directly involved with the input-output device. Interrupt-driven, where the processor can go and work on some other task and wakes. Oh, your timer is done. Alexa, stop. This working from home is fantastic. The input-driven input-output, where just like I got interrupted, the processor receives an interrupt, and then it can go and handle that, whatever the request is. But otherwise, if it makes a request for input-output device, it can send off the request and then go and work on other things. And then the direct memory access, where once the setup takes place, the processor is not directly involved in the interaction between, usually the drive and memory. What a train wreck.